Many of us are drawn to the allure of the unknown, but few consider the horrors that can fester in isolation. What happens when generations of solitude twist the human form into something unrecognizable, something monstrous? This is the story of 5 urban explorers who ventured deep into the Appalachian wilderness to uncover a forgotten piece of history, only to discover the terrifying consequences of inbreeding and isolation, and to find themselves hunted by the very people history forgot. The group had heard of Raven's Hollow through fragments of folklore and grainy internet posts. An uncharted ghost town in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, it was rumored to have been abandoned after a catastrophic mine collapse. Maya Thompson, the leader of the crew, was captivated by the mystery. For her, Raven's Hollow was the ultimate prize for their urban exploration channel. "I've checked everywhere," she told her team, spreading out a rough, hand-drawn map. "It's not on any modern records. We'll be the first to document it." Her enthusiasm was contagious, but there were warnings too. Locals spoke in hushed tones about the hollow, saying it was cursed or worse. At a lonely gas station just before the trailhead, a weathered man leaned against the counter and said, "Turn back now. If the mines didn't kill those folks, their blood sure did." "What's that supposed to mean?" Derek Miller, the group's cocky thrill seeker, asked with a smirk. The man just shook his head. "They stayed too long, too close. That kind of closeness ain't natural." Brushing off the cryptic warning, Maya and her team pressed on. The Appalachian forest was a maze of towering trees and winding paths. As the group hiked deeper, the landscape grew more rugged, the air heavier with an unplaceable tension. The canopy above seemed to press down on them, and the stillness of the woods became unnerving, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. "You feel that?" Sam Patel, the group's medic, asked, his voice low. "Feel what?" Derek Miller shot back, though his usual bravado had softened. "Like we're being watched." Maya Thompson, their leader, dismissed the unease with a wave of her hand. "It's just the wilderness. It always feels alive." By late afternoon, they stumbled upon the outskirts of Raven's Hollow. The town appeared untouched by time, rotting buildings with sagging roofs, rusted mining carts half buried in the dirt. But there was something off about it. A stagnant smell hung in the air, a mix of decay and damp earth, and the silence felt oppressive, as though the town itself resented their presence. "This is incredible," Lena Rodriguez whispered, already snapping photos of the eerie surroundings. Her excitement, however, wavered as she ventured into one of the crumbling homes. Inside, she found a small box of faded photographs and brittle letters, their edges curling with age. The images made her stomach churn. They depicted gaunt families with hollowed cheeks, their eyes staring blankly into the camera. What was most unsettling wasn't their expressions, but their features. High cheekbones, sharp noses, and a disturbing sameness that ran through every face, as though each generation had drawn from the same shallow pool. "Looks like a genetic bottleneck," Sam muttered over her shoulder. His tone was clinical, but his unease was palpable. Generations of the same families interbreeding. They probably didn't have many options out here. Derek let out a low whistle. "Talk about keeping it in the family." "Not funny," Ethan said sharply, scanning the photographs with a frown. "This isn't just a small gene pool. It's a dead end. Look at the eyes, the structure of the jaws. This isn't just inbreeding, it's devolution." Sam's words lingered, the weight of their implications thickening the already stifling air. Outside, a faint rustle broke the silence, but when they turned to look, nothing moved. Only the forest remained, watching. As dusk fell, the forest came alive with unsettling noises, branches snapping, faint whispers carried on the wind. "Probably animals," Derek said, though his usual bravado had softened. He gripped his flashlight tightly, scanning the trees with uneasy glances. "Animals don't whisper," Lena muttered, keeping her camera close to her chest, as if its lens could shield her from the growing tension. The group began setting up camp in a small clearing, but the air felt wrong, thick and heavy, as if the forest was closing in around them. Ethan gathered firewood, but his sharp eyes caught something unusual, a carving on a nearby tree. "Hey, check this out," he called. The others gathered, shining their flashlights on the crude etching. It was a distorted figure, its arms too long, its face unnervingly similar to the gaunt features they had seen in the photographs. "Some kind of local lore?" Lena asked, snapping a picture. "It looks human," Sam said, his voice low, but not quite. The forest seemed to grow quieter, as if offended by their presence. The silence was broken when Derek stumbled forward with a sharp cry. "Watch your step," he grunted, pointing to the ground where his foot had almost slipped into a hidden pit. The group crowded around, their lights illuminating the sharp stakes lining the bottom. The stakes were smeared with something dark and dried, clinging to them like a warning. "That's not fresh," Maya said, her voice tight, "but it's not old either." Nearby, a crude snare hung from a low branch, designed to hoist its victim into the air. The rope was frayed, yet sturdy, and it bore the same strange markings as the carving on the tree. "Someone's still out here," Maya said, her voice dropping to a whisper. No one spoke for a moment, the forest around them pressing in. In the distance, faint laughter drifted through the trees, a sound too human to be an animal, but too distorted to be real. The group exchanged nervous glances. Whatever was out there wasn't just watching, it was waiting. Their fears were confirmed that night in a crescendo of dread. It began with the faintest of movements at the edge of their vision, shadows slipping between trees, too quick to focus on but impossible to ignore. The group's flashlights cut through the darkness, their beams trembling as they flicked from one direction to another. The forest seemed alive, each snapping twig and rustling leaf pulling their attention, fraying their nerves. Low murmurs followed, disjointed and chilling, like a song sung in broken English by a voice that had long forgotten how to form proper words. "Who? Intruders. Fresh." The words barely carried through the heavy night air, distorted into something half human, half animalistic. "They're messing with us," Ethan said, his voice low and strained, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself more than the others. Then, one of the figures stepped into the light. Lena's sharp intake of breath broke the oppressive silence as the creature, no, the man, was revealed. He stood hunched, his limbs unnaturally bent, as if shaped by a lifetime of moving through cramped spaces. His jaw jutted at an odd angle, sharp and grotesque, his teeth uneven and yellowed. The skin stretched tightly over his skeletal frame was ashen and pocked, marred with scars and sores. But it was his eyes that struck terror into the group. They gleamed with a disturbing combination of animal cunning and fractured humanity. His gaze darted between them, calculating and hungry, his head tilting unnaturally, as if trying to understand the sight of outsiders. "They're inbred," Sam whispered, his voice trembling. "Generations of isolation. No new blood. This is what happens." The figure let out a sound, a guttural laugh, wet and rasping, that made the hairs on their necks stand on end. Then, with deliberate slowness, he raised his hand, revealing a rusted blade streaked with dried blood. The steel caught the light, its surface jagged and worn from years of crude sharpening. Lena stumbled backward, her flashlight falling to the ground, its beam casting wild, shifting shadows that made the forest seem alive. The figure took one shuffling step toward her, then another, his twisted body moving with unnerving intent. "Run!" Maya's voice sliced through the panic. The group scattered, plunging into the forest as fear overtook them. The sound of their frantic breaths and pounding footsteps filled the air, but it was drowned out by the eerie cries of the watchers. More figures emerged from the shadows, their silhouettes distorted by the flickering flashlights left behind. "Fresh meat. Run, little rabbits." The voices mocked, twisting the group's words from earlier in the day. The watchers didn't chase immediately. Instead, they moved like predators, savoring the hunt, their disjointed laughter and garbled murmurs echoing around the explorers. Shapes darted in and out of sight, always just beyond reach, reminding the group that they were being toyed with. Maya tripped over a root and scrambled to her feet, her heart hammering as she glanced back. She saw them then, more of the watchers, emerging from the darkness. Some were small and wiry, others grotesquely large, their deformities exaggerated to monstrous extremes. One dragged a twisted leg behind him, his face barely resembling anything human, yet his eyes burned with cruel intent. They weren't just hunting, they were enjoying it. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. This wasn't a fight for survival. It was a game the group wasn't meant to win. The clan didn't rush to attack. They savored the chase, moving with a calculated cruelty that felt more like a ritual than a hunt. They hunted like wolves, circling the explorers, cutting off escape routes, and driving them deeper into the labyrinthine woods. Their knowledge of the terrain was unnervingly precise. What looked like random fallen logs and tangled undergrowth to the explorers were carefully arranged obstacles, each one funneling them toward an inevitable confrontation. The group's movements became frantic. Flashlights darted in every direction, casting trembling beams through the darkness. The cries and guttural laughs of the clan echoed around them, growing louder and closer with every passing second. Every sound seemed to come from multiple directions at once, branches snapping, distorted voices mimicking their own frantic shouts, and the low, breathy hum of something unseen stalking just out of sight. "We can't stop," Maya shouted, her voice taut with fear as she grabbed Lena's arm to keep her moving. Then it happened. Derek was the first to fall. His foot caught a seemingly innocent vine, but in an instant, the ground gave way beneath him. A hidden snare snapped taut, yanking him violently into the air. His flashlight tumbled to the forest floor, its beam spinning wildly as Derek's panicked screams tore through the night. "Help me!" he shrieked, thrashing in the crude trap. His voice cracked with desperation as the rope tightened around his leg, suspending him upside down several feet above the ground. The others turned toward him, but before they could react, the shadows moved. The clan emerged from the darkness, their grotesque forms illuminated in flashes of light. One figure, taller than the rest, reached out with gnarled, claw-like hands and gripped Derek's flailing arm. The man's face was barely human. His jaw hung askew, his eyes sunken, but gleaming with malice. "Go, now!" Maya screamed, shoving the others forward. They ran, leaving Derek's screams behind as they plunged deeper into the woods. Tears streaked Lena's face as she stumbled over roots, her breath hitching with sobs. Ethan's hands were shaking so badly he dropped his flashlight, but he didn't stop to pick it up. Sam kept close to Maya, his usually calm demeanor shattered by the terror etched into his face. Finally, they stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood a dilapidated church, its once proud steeple leaning precariously to one side. The doors creaked open under Maya's weight as the group shoved their way inside. The interior was a ruin, pews rotted and splintered, the altar covered in moss. Candles, long burned out, sat on rusted holders, and faded murals depicting saints seemed to watch them from the crumbling walls. Maya's flashlight caught a small desk in a corner, its surface covered in dust and mold. On it lay a ledger, its leather cover cracked with age. She opened it carefully, her hands trembling as she flipped through the brittle pages. The writing was faded but legible, detailing the town's descent into chaos. "It's all here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The collapse trapped them, no way out. Supplies ran out. Then..." Ethan leaned over her shoulder, scanning the pages. "It didn't just trap them, it isolated them, cut them off completely. They couldn't leave. No help, no outside contact. They must have..." He trailed off, his expression darkening as he read further. "They turned on each other," Maya said grimly, piecing it together. "First, out of desperation. Then..." "They adapted," Sam finished, his voice heavy with dread. The ledger revealed the horrifying truth. As the food ran out and the years passed, survival became a cruel, twisted priority. The townspeople turned to inbreeding, their lineage becoming a grotesque cycle of genetic mutation and madness. With no new blood to break the chain, the deformities worsened with each generation. Their bodies twisted, their minds fractured, and their humanity faded until all that was left was instinct, a drive to survive at any cost. Lena, standing by a shattered window, whispered, "They're still here, living like this, hunting like this." Outside, the laughter began again, closer this time. Shadows flitted through the trees, and the sound of something heavy dragging over the forest floor sent shivers through the group. "They're waiting for us to run again," Ethan said, his voice hollow. "No," Maya said, gripping the ledger tightly. "They're waiting to finish what they started." The explorers knew they were out of options. Their only chance was to reach the mines, an idea fraught with danger, but offering a sliver of hope. The map they'd found in the dilapidated church revealed a network of tunnels beneath the mountain, leading to an old exit on the other side. Maya clutched the map tightly, her knuckles white as they stumbled through the forest under the relentless pursuit of the clan. The guttural voices of their hunters echoed all around them, bouncing off the trees in grotesque mimicry. "Run! Maya, run!" they called, each word twisted and broken like a cruel imitation of humanity. Ethan flinched as one voice, disturbingly close, hissed, "Help me!" in the same desperate tone Derek had used before he was taken. He quickened his pace, forcing himself not to look back. The entrance to the mines loomed ahead, a gaping maw of blackness carved into the side of the mountain. The air that seeped out was cold and damp, carrying the metallic tang of rust and something else, something foul. "We don't have a choice," Maya said, her voice shaking as much from fear as exhaustion. "It's this, or we die out here." The group hesitated only a moment before plunging into the darkness. The air inside was heavy and thick, carrying the echoes of their hurried footsteps and ragged breaths. Their flashlights illuminated the narrow, jagged walls where ancient mining tools hung rusted and forgotten. But the most chilling sight awaited them deeper inside. Piles of bones, haphazardly strewn across the cavern floor, glinted in the dim light. Some were cracked and splintered, their marrow long since sucked dry. Others were disturbingly fresh, their edges still stained with dark, clotted blood. A skull, its eye sockets empty, sat atop one of the piles like a grotesque trophy. "Oh my God," Lena whispered, her voice barely audible over the thundering pulse in her ears. She stumbled back, clutching her camera as if it could protect her from the grim reality. "This isn't just survival," Ethan muttered, his face pale. "This is ritual." Before anyone could respond, the clan descended upon them. The first attack came from the shadows, a clawed hand, swiping out and catching Lena's arm. She screamed, the flashlight tumbling from her grip and shattering against the rocks. Chaos erupted as the group fought back with whatever they could find. Broken pickaxes leaned against the walls, jagged rocks, even their bare hands. Sam tackled one of the attackers, his medical training forgotten in the primal struggle for survival. The clan member thrashed beneath him, its deformed face twisted into a snarl as it clawed at his arms. Sam drove a jagged rock into its throat, the creature gurgling as it fell limp, but there was no time to celebrate. More of the clan emerged from the darkness, their grotesque forms illuminated only by the flickering light of the remaining flashlights. Their guttural laughter filled the cavern, echoing like the calls of predators toying with their prey. Sam turned to help Maya, who was fending off two attackers at once, their rusted blades slicing through the air. But before he could move, a pair of hands shot out from the shadows and grabbed him by the shoulders. "No!" he screamed, his voice reverberating through the tunnels. The group turned just in time to see Sam being dragged into the darkness, his legs kicking violently, his screams fading as he was pulled deeper into the mine. Ethan and Maya lunged after him, but it was too late. Sam's flashlight fell to the ground, its beam rolling to a stop against another pile of bones. "Sam!" Maya cried, her voice cracking. "He's gone!" Ethan shouted, pulling her back as more of the clan surged toward them. They retreated, stumbling over the uneven ground as the clan's guttural laughter grew louder. Maya's mind raced, her grip tightening on the pickaxe in her hands. She forced herself to keep moving, but Sam's screams echoed in her ears, a haunting reminder of how close they all were to the same fate. The tunnels seemed endless, each turn more disorienting than the last. The walls closed in tighter, the air grew thinner, and the sense of being hunted never waned. Maya knew they were running out of time, and they were running out of hope. Maya and Ethan stumbled through the last stretch of the tunnel, their breaths ragged, their bodies battered. The air was thick with dust and the metallic tang of blood. Behind them, the guttural cries of the clan echoed, growing louder as the hunters closed in. "Almost there!" Maya shouted, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. The faint glimmer of moonlight ahead was the only thing keeping them moving. The tunnel exit loomed, a jagged opening in the rock that spilled cool night air into the suffocating darkness. But the clan was relentless, their deformed silhouettes flickering in and out of the light as they scrambled closer. Maya's hands trembled as she pulled the last stick of dynamite from her pack, its worn casing smudged with dirt. Ethan fumbled with the lighter, his fingers slick with sweat and shaking uncontrollably. "Hurry!" she urged, her eyes darting back to the shadows advancing toward them. The fuse finally sparked, a tiny flame racing along the cord. They ran, their lungs burning, as Maya threw the dynamite into the mouth of the tunnel. The world seemed to hold its breath for a moment, and then the explosion roared through the mountains. The force of the blast knocked them off their feet. Rocks and debris rained down, filling the air with a choking cloud of dust. Maya coughed violently, pulling herself up to see the tunnel entrance collapsing in on itself, sealing the horrors behind tons of unforgiving stone. The cries of the clan were cut off, swallowed by the deafening silence that followed. Maya and Ethan exchanged a hollow look, their faces streaked with dirt and tears. They had escaped, but at what cost? The return to civilization felt surreal, as if they had crossed back into a world that no longer made sense. They were safe now, but haunted. The memories of Derek, Lena, and Sam, screaming, fighting, being dragged into the darkness, clung to them like a second skin. Maya said little during the drive back, staring blankly out the window as Ethan navigated the winding roads. When they reached the outskirts of a small town, she finally broke the silence. "No one will believe us," she said, her voice hollow. "They don't need to," Ethan replied. "We just need to move on." But Maya couldn't move on, not completely. She spent days combing through the footage they had managed to salvage, piecing together a somber montage for their channel. The final video was unlike anything they had ever produced. There were no thrilling explorations, no triumphant discoveries, only fragments of their journey, stitched together with raw, unfiltered terror. It ended with a single haunting shot of Raven's Hollow, captured by Lena before everything fell apart. The camera lingered on the decaying buildings and the oppressive forest that surrounded them. As the image zoomed into the shadows, the screen faded to black. And then, just as the video ended, a distorted voice whispered, "Come back." Raven's Hollow remains hidden, its secrets buried in the Appalachian wilderness. Its story now exists only in the digital ether, a chilling cautionary tale for those drawn to the allure of the unknown. But for those who dare to seek it, remember this: some places are forgotten for a reason, and some horrors are best left undisturbed.